MVP Black ties up the series, best of 5 with Soul Torturers after the difficult loss on Battlefield of Eternity, one of the battlegrounds we have known for MVP Black for just about forever. But now it seems like maybe things are going to be smooth sailing for MVP Black, or is it?
I mean, I feel like there's no level of studying Heroes of the Storm that's going to be able to help you answer that question. Just go ahead, pull out your wallet, your pocket, you know, grab a coin, give her the old flip, and that's going to be the odds here into the next game. I mean, I wanted to say that I feel like MVP Black will be able to restore it and just dominate throughout this, but I mean, I'm not convinced.
You always kind of wonder, when you look at teams that have championship metal about them, you always wonder, when are they going to flip that switch? It's always that thing, is that they have the talent, they have it within them, but are they able to just say, all right, we had a bad game, we flip the switch and we turn it on, and then we become the dominant team that we know that we can be? After going 21-3 in your own region, especially in Korea, you'd think that you'd have a little bit better performance thus far.
Yeah, even a team that has the best mental capacity, once you start winning for a long time, can struggle with that. It's something that we've talked to Fnatic about before, and how their loss to Playing Ducks at the end of the league was able to help them kind of redefine what it means to be a champion and still how they approach their opponents, even if everyone else is saying their opponents are lesser skilled than them. But we are ready for game number 3 in the draft. The Battleground pool, once again, is up, and our game 3 will take place on Tomb.
Same, you know, conversation point about Soul Torturers taking us to Infernal Shrines holds true with MVP Black taking us to Tomb of the Spider Queen, but it's slightly changed in the fact that we just saw that MVP Black is comfortable going into the Ariel traditional double support, and this is the map style that it's really going to be more dominant on. So I don't expect Ariel making it through this draft. I think she'll just be flat banned right out the gates. And specifically on the side of MVP Black, I expect that to happen, but we'll see.
Yeah, if Soul Torturers feels like it is the... they are the first pick team, so they would ideally love to get her. That means that they can leave her as the banned to the second pick team. They will instead take out Tassadar, a hero that has been enabling a lot. Tassadar has such an interesting win rate when you look at this event and the Chinese and Korean metas compared to how he ended at the Western Clash. Very low at the Western Clash, but coming into this really high in both China and Korea.
The thing about Tassadar is that if you look at the hero pools of Rich and you look at the hero pools of Sake, more than half their games, they've each shared a hero pool of about 2. Tassadar and Falstad, and then we saw a lot of Malthael and Illidan for Genji, for Rich, but in return, we finally have the follow-up CC we've expected for Stitches.
There is at least going to be a Strangling Vines to be able to deal with the double support here on the side of Soul Torturers, and even though Stitches, this is one of his better maps, one of the things to often consider that I feel like is kind of neglected when looking at the double support meta is Stitches stands out into double support because he's also one of the few that can actually kill it. He can get the hook and get the insta burst onto one of those targets and make it happen. And also double support wants long sustaining fights, meaning the odds of you having a 2-hook cycle, which is going to be that 32 seconds, is at least an option, which it traditionally wouldn't be without that.
We saw the Tyrael last game, and sometimes, you know, you've got that Stitches hook, you need somebody to, 1, dive in with you, and 2, add that layer of protection, and Tyrael's one of those heroes that can do that. I don't know if it's too early in the draft to commit to that double Angel draft, but I feel like that has to be something to be considered for this draft.
I wouldn't mind just the Uther and then whatever else. Vala? Okay, Vala over the Lunara is... You know, it's going to help them a little bit into the early game. Having the mobility to be able to dodge the hook also is going to be nice, not having to use maybe a leaping strike if somehow you have the freak case where you're dodging a hook and have the option to use it. So I don't totally dislike that, and now having the double support. My biggest fear is, do we see Soul Torturers actually do what this composition does best? Because even when we see a lot of, you know, the Eastern teams taking it, it's not like they're getting enough out of it in the early game, especially when looking towards China. Granted, you know, Soul Torturers coming out of the Taiwanese region, they have shown to be more competent with macro play than some of the other teams.
Yeah, and they have been, at least in game number 1 especially, bringing out the aggression early on in this series even versus MVP Black. It didn't happen as much versus SPT. In fact, they lost the early game versus SPT, but they seem to have a good idea and understanding of what they need to do in this series if they're actually going to be able to take games off of MVP Black.
After that last game, Soul Torturers, you know, if we look at MVP Black traditionally, I like the Tyrael ban there, but I think traditionally you're going to look at potentially a Greymane or after that last game, a Cassia. that's going to be on the side of MVP Black, and you got to decide, are you willing to ban out one to deal with the other, or do you just let it pass through and find another target? And that's what they do, and they try and target the Medivh on Rich.
So in the realm of general Rich picks that we know, Medivh is gone. Illidan's still up. Don't see as much Illidan play on Tomb, but he seems to be fine with running it just about anywhere. Malthael we've seen once from him, and then otherwise a lot of shying away from that hero because of the nerfs. Why are you giggling over there?
I don't mind the idea of going into the Malthael here for Black, but if they do so, I would like them to... I want to say I would like to see them hold off, but at this point, I don't know if that's going to gain them an advantage with how uncharacteristic I feel like they've not only performed, but also their drafting is at this point in time. I feel less confident kind of claiming the direction they can move and where there could be a hole. They do go for the Gul'dan to try and make up for the 4-man with the Wave Clear, and they've also got Greymane, who should be a really great follow-up to the Stitches hook.
It's a good follow-up, and after seeing Rich on Arthas last game, we got to start looking at potentially the solo laner. Greymane can fit that role, but if we're talking about early game kill potential between the Gul'dan and Greymane to follow up on the Stitches, generally you're going to keep that in the 4-man, as you said, unless we see more of the 2-1-2 split that we saw earlier. But Rich's hero is going to be something that I want to keep an eye on for that last pick, and it's definitely something that we've seen them prioritize the last 2 drafts, is to let that be the last pick and try and counter what Soul Torturers is trying to do.
Which is a very Soul Torturers thing to do, actually. When I was looking at their drafts in the regional prior to coming into this event, they loved to leave the melee until the end so that they could make sure that they were getting a hero that could deal with the 1v1 appropriately, the solo lane. Last 2 picks, looking for a warrior, and then some other kind of, probably melee, Murden and Dahaka.
I was really hoping that was going to be a Diablo rather than a Murden, or at least somebody other than the Murden, which has been, you know, a staple of the Eastern meta versus the Western. Murden has held on a lot longer, but I just feel like anything that can provide direct threat onto the Gul'dan, but also isn't necessarily overly vulnerable to the Gul'dan Horrify that we have to be considering. They're going to be clumping into the Ariel. It's a really nice response to it all. I just feel like Diablo's pressure and also what he can do with the APOC to be able to split the members suddenly can kill some of the momentum we currently see MVP Black have with the theme they've developed in this comp.
The last time that we saw the Ariel Uther, we saw Divine Storm. In this case, though, we have the displacement of Horrify to be able to use after the Crystal Aegis, so you force the Aegis, and then you Horrify after it. Does this make you think that it's got to be a Divine Shield in this next game?
Yeah, I would be willing to go as far as to say that if they go into the Divine Storm because of the Gul'dan and the AoE separation, if they think they're going to be able to move up and just one-shot the Gul'dan on the backline, especially moving through that Arthas, it's just absolutely unreasonable, especially if we see Greymane moving into Cursed Bullet, though that hasn't been a huge heroic choice into this tournament. With the Stitches, the follow-up, and the pressure they can provide, I think it's a must to go in D-Shield.
Well, if that was a Malthael, I would argue otherwise, but we do have that Arthas 2 games in a row. I think this is a good pickup for that Rich hero. I like the fact that MVP Black is no longer prioritizing a first rotation Rich hero, and now they're looking more towards the back end of the draft and fitting a little bit more to their playstyle and trying to counter the enemy team.
It's actually kind of interesting, too, because outside of the actual Illidan meta, which was just he was beyond the rest of the competitive heroes of viability, he was just an outlier. Illidan has never been a great top end of the draft pick, but it still kind of remained true, and it's been interesting to see it now suddenly drop colossally for MVP Black.
Well, thank you, Dread. We'll see you after the game. In the blue, we've got MVP Black with Sake, Tist, Kyocha, Reset, and Rich.
And on the right side in red, we'll see in just a moment, is going to be that of Soul Torturers. Zola again on that Oriole. We're going to keep a good eye on him. But after that first game and in this double support comp, Gilly, I think a lot of eyes definitely have to be on God Dog on Vala.
Yeah, we don't get to see Wizen Duelist, but in this instance, when you have the double warrior, double support, there is a lot riding on God Dog to be the true hyper carry, the one who is being out and more aggressive than you would otherwise want to be on a Vala. She has to be dodging the hook. She maybe even has to take hooks if she has the movement speed from a Hot Pursuit and all the hatred stacks up. It's up to her to be able to provide Zola with that energy, or in the instance of Zola not having energy, Cucumber then to have the follow-up heals.
That was a weird moment as we saw the corruption go out, hit a few. We saw the heal come out, and Tahaka just kind of ducked under it. It was a weird interaction. You got to be, and that's the thing about running double support, making sure that you're aware of what your team can supply you. And if you don't run double support, if you don't practice it a lot, it's kind of a fallback thing. Small moments like that. I know it's 30 seconds in, a small moment, but you don't want that to be a telling sign for the rest of the game.
A lot of people hit by the roots. Dread was talking about Strangling Vines and the healing reduction that it can provide from Entangling Roots at level 7. See if Rich wants to go, or Kyocha wants to go into that later on. Scroll's going to jump in though, hoping to hit with the Storm Bolt.
Goddog being very aggressive as well, understanding there was no real threat to him, just instantly dived the backline with that Murd and tried to put some pressure onto the Gul'dan. Not able to do enough just yet, but you can see the aggression coming out from both these teams. And this rotation, Gilly, Tahaka's in the top lane against a Greyman. This is not our traditional 4-man rotation we see.
No, definitely not. It does allow a lot of fluidity in the rotations, and it makes sure that another follow-up for hooks is along generally with the Stitches and having Rich there with Tis. But the roots, as always, are going to be there to follow up, and in this instance, just very fluid rotations back and forth from MVP Black, making sure that they can have a lot of pressure both in the bottom and in the top, wherever Soul Torturers are not responding.
Are you the least bit surprised as we see Reset going in there that we don't see Arthas in that solo? Because it's good that you can land the hook, the roots, but your kill potential lies in Greymane. You don't see that. We're seeing Q build from Gul'dan. That just makes it bigger. It doesn't make it stronger. And so if you're not looking for that early game kill potential, perhaps you're just playing the map, playing the rotation, trying to control the lanes.
Yeah, it does seem like there is more of a focus from MVP in those early game hooks, in the chain crowd control that they have. But also, they have so much wave clear, and they have a lot of different wave clear heroes that MVP Black, as long as they're constantly pushing the lanes, can start trying to drain the ammo on the towers and get more of a control over the rotation game so that they can start looking toward the turning points.
Well, the rotation's obviously changing up here just a little bit, but Tahaka continues to remain in the top. And Tahaka obviously having that superior wave clear. Obviously just, he's going to stay up there until somebody forces him out. And I don't think that MVP Black has that option.
To see how Reset was even willing to hold on to the wave, because they really don't want the towers to be drained. They understand that that is a huge factor of Tomb of the Spider Queen. MVP Black always, since getting Rich, it feels like they have been always thinking multiple minutes ahead of the game. And so they're already looking toward the damage that they can deal with their first Web Weaver.
Well, both teams willing to early commit to kind of this slow grind style that we're seeing right now. Play around the gems, but Gilly, both teams now have enough gems, one more here for Soul Torturers to pick up, but both teams conceivably have enough gems to try and get the ball rolling here for the Web Weavers.
Yeah, we generally see the first turn-in phase somewhere around the level 7 mark for the team, but it can fluctuate quite a bit depending on how good of scholars each side has. And there are some important ones on either side. With Elun's Grace, Malfurion is going to be huge for MVP Black and Kyocha being able to stall those out.
You know, one thing I think inevitably we'll get to the late game here unless something just blows up, but I really want to consider what Goddog's going to pick at 16. Potentially go into something that does that percentage-based damage. When you look at the high health pool of Stitches and the built-in armor of Arthas, right now it just seems like they're willing to sit there and let Goddog poke away on Vala because it's not a real threat early game.
And if we saw that Manticore that you were alluding to, do you think that maybe we'd even see something as far as Ariel getting Will of Heaven for the attack speed?
It could potentially be there, and it's something that we've seen a lot based around these double support comps that have Ariel give that extra attack speed, build up that hope a little bit quicker, and put out more percentage damage a little bit quicker.
We now have the first Web Weaver phase, and it is MVP Black's. They're getting the fruits of their labor and controlling the rotations in the early game so far, and no kills from either side. Like you said, both have been more patient this game than trying to be very aggressive like we've seen in the last two.
Gilly, you talked about MVP Black kind of holding on to that minion wave so it didn't eat up all that ammo, but they significant wave clear that Gul'dan and team brings. You can see that middle lane and the top lane in particular now almost eaten up, but that middle lane had almost none as Reset. He's going to go ahead and use that disengage to get away. Goddog not able to follow up as the roots come in, and now they're looking to re-engage, but nice detainment strike there.
Man, there was a frustration with Howling, or the Hungering Arrow, and now Dahaka goes down. Greymane eventually does drop, but a hook's going to land on Zola. He has the full energy, will heal himself back up, but the roots catch him from Kyoto. Perfect roots to make sure that MVP Black walk away with 3 kills to the 1 of their Greymane.
Wow, they just opened that up instantly. We did see the Hand of Protection picked up by Uther. It was used a half second too late as that hook did land. But as you can see right now, MVP Black went from, hey, look, we're even. We're going to get this Web Weaver phase. We're going to get a fort. We're going to open things up and take level and a half lead. That's when it starts to get into snowball territory when you talk about hitting that level 10.
Yeah, sometimes it's really hard to convey how much what MVP Black did in the early game, how much they're going to get from it once they get a Web Weaver phase. Because now you look at the lanes, when all is said and done with those 50 gems, MVP Black are looking at heroic abilities a level and a half ahead of Soul Torturers. They took out 1 fort, which is not always possible when you get the first Web Weavers. A lot of times you're just looking at towers in front of forts, and they've all but taken out the other 2 forts too. When we talk about a potential snowball situation, this is the type of situation we are talking about.
It's a scary prospect as they're looking to pick up as many gems as possible. They need another 11 picked up from those waves. In the meantime, you can see Rich turning in what he's got. But Gilly, the Murden build on the side of Soul Torturers, very offense-oriented, going into the stacking quest at 1, but then Skullcracker at 7 to try and get some of those stuns, and you gotta wonder where that fits with their playstyle. Is it just for that frontline control? Because this isn't a dive comp, and if you're trying to get onto the Malfurion, trying to get onto the Gul'dan, you're going to find a very difficult time when you see the rest of the team is full ranged behind you.
Yeah, Jay, how do you think that's more about making sure with Perfect Storm that they're still building a little bit what they can into damage, knowing that they are a double warrior, double support team? Typically you see some adjustments in builds to allot for adding the damage to fights?
You do, but when it's your main tank, that main damage dealer, or excuse me, the main frontliner, yes, you can get that extra healing at 15, and yes, it can kind of supplement that, but it's kind of a double-edged sword. Are you willing to give up a little bit of that extra control? Willing to give up that extra potential thunderclap that you can get with the reset from Ironforge momentum, things like that? Well, we're going to see, but level 10 Gilly has been picked up here for Soul Torturers. We got ourselves a new game.
And they have their heroic abilities. It is Divine Shield this time, as well as Strafe, still to make sure that you can add the extra healing. Twilight Dream connects, but not before Gul'dan goes down.
Gul'dan goes down, but Goddog went down as well. That is your battery, that is your damage dealer, and Tist walking away with Zola as he walked to the other side, eating those tower shots, forcing out the Divine Shield, and they're continuing to look for that pick, and that is going to be Zola going down as well, and Cucumber seems to be the next to follow.
Oh, 27 gems were just depleted from Cucumber from the stores of Soul Torturers, and now Bowie will be the next to be brought down, limiting the gems even more for Soul Torturers. And MVP Black with those kills, the ability for them to be able to turn that fight around and are walking away with this. Now they've got level 13. They're going to start with their next turn in.
They're going to get that turn in indeed, and we already saw the pressure they were able to put on in the early push, and they're going to be able to put on even more. Gul'dan has finished his level 1, allows him that little bit safer poke. On the same coin, Arthas pretty much finished with his. He's got 1 more route. So the engagement control that we see from this team pretty heavily, whether we talk about Arthas, whether we talk about the hook from Stitches, there's a lot to be feared, and also to be feared is the level 13 picked up as well.
There's level 13. Still waiting to see what Gul'dan gets. If he wants to get spell armor. It's all your ability to take care of yourself, right? Self-sustainability here. Potentially a health stone as well for a self-heal. But as heroic abilities tick down the cooldowns for MVP Black, they can get even more and more aggressive with these Web Weavers that have already pushed up toward the keep structures of Soul Torturers. What do Soul Torturers need to do at this point?
They need to try and hold on to this keep, but it's looking more and more difficult as you just see Sake throwing out Qs, throwing out E's. It's like, here, have some flames, have some corruption. Scroll trying to get on that backside. This is the part I was talking about. He's isolating himself on that backside, and Zola getting that energy from Goddog so far, allowing out.
Creating space for Goddog to take out the Web Weaver, but eventually goes down. Now Zola has to use Crystal Aegis on herself, but comes out to the roots of Kyocha.
That's unreal. Zola gonna try and get that heal off, but the poison is so plentiful. Not enough on that. Excuse me, he does get enough, but it's not enough to keep the rest of the team alive as Vala goes down. And there again, this is the problem with double support. The minute that mana or that hope battery goes down, yes, you have that Uther there, but the minute that goes away, your damage goes away, your healing potential goes away, and sustaining in team fights is almost an impossible task.
ST do keep the keep alive for
They're
now.
lucky.
They do. They have kept it alive. They are absolutely, without a doubt, down and out in this game, but they have not lost it just yet. MVP Black have a lot of gems at their disposal. Soul Torturers now have to start the slow climb back. They're going to get an opportunity here as they hit 13. But MVP Black know that ST will be searching for that opportunity.
And one way to counter that, Gilly, you can give up a little to get a little in return. There's sometimes people are like, you can't let them turn in, you can't let them turn in. Well, if I've got Siege Giants pushing in the bottom and a Night Camp pushing in middle, I'm more than happy to say that, you know what, go ahead and turn in. We're not going to risk taking a 15 to 13 fight. We'll play the 16 game. You either turn in and you're going to have a significantly less strong push, or you're going to wait till 16 and we're going to regain control of the map. MVP Black making the right calls.
What do you think about this? Okay, I'm glad that we see actually Dahaka coming back in. Horrify is used very early on in this fight. God Dog is still being able to stay safe and try to bring out that damage for Zola. But again, God Dog gets hit by a hook. Crystal Aegis is forced.
Crystal Aegis perfect there, and now we see the strafe in return trying to put out the damage, but Scroll very deep right there. You can see he's getting those mini stuns as much as he can, but Cucumber is going to fall on Uther. He's going to supply the heals in the meantime. They're going to try and turn around the damage, and Greymane somehow staying alive for the meantime and reset. It's still alive, Gilly.
Sake has been untouched. Hook connects, and the final member of ST falls. Sake was untouched that whole fight, just constantly shelling out the Fell Flames over and over again, while Rich sat on a lot of the members because ST wrapped around in a sort of choke position, and ST were faced in such a difficult spot in that fight because of it.
I'll say that Soul Tortures, that Crystal Aegis was perfect. The problem is there was just so much else that MVP Black did right. So Soul Tortures, by all means, did not lose that fight so decisively that they just should tuck their tail and run. They actually held their own for a little bit. It just kind of fell a little bit short. And again, that talent tier disadvantage, that level disadvantage is sometimes a little bit difficult to overcome.
Now look at this. MVP Black knew that ST were going to be looking for a fight, right? That was their one opportunity. So they got mercenary camps, and they do this quite often. They'll get mercenary camps and then bait it. And then they end up, as long as they win the fight, in a great position because those camps have pushed. They just got a double keep play, didn't even need a turn in for it, and then because they forced Dahaka to come to them in the fight, ST abandoned getting their own bruisers, and MVP Black walked past, they're like, oh, look at this. We'll take this too. That looks great. Thank you very much.
The hardest part about all of this, as we see that Soul Tortures thinking that, hey, one of our best defenses is going to be to find them on the boss. Soul Tortures has not managed to turn in yet, as we see the double root there, but the detainment strike in return. But Gul'dan, Gilly, continues to just terrorize. Nice cleanse there, though, on Soul Tortures.
I think you mean Gul'dan, because he is doing so much right now to Soul Torturers. But it's a group effort. MVP Black test his stitches is out of control. It's statistically one of the best stitches, if not the best, in the entire world. I mean, I guess you have JPL to contend with too, but
he's pretty good.
He is pretty good.
Well, Gilly, we've got ourselves another web weaver turn in. You have catapults pushing in mid and bottom lane, and MVP Black, they don't even care about that top keep. They are looking to potentially end the game right here, right now. 3-level lead, talent tier advantage. They get one pick here. It's all but over, and Skrull recognizes that, looking for a fight.
Yeah, they're going to have to take this fight without 16. Their backs are against the wall, and that wall is their own core. Horrify forces the supports apart. God Dog using strength to make sure that the energy is there, but Crystal Aegis again has to be used, and Muradin dies out of it.
Sake. He's going the extra damage every time he hits one of those Fell Flames. Even Muradin cannot deal with the damage. As you see, Soul Tortures are falling apart here as MVP Black pushing towards the core as they look to take game number 3.
MVP Black getting the exact kills that they deem necessary, while the Web Weavers bring it down the shields, down the health, and take out the core of Soul Torturers. 17 kills to 3,
Whew.
putting MVP Black at 2-1.
Talk about putting a stamp on a game. 17 kills to 3. That Gul'dan pickup was brilliant. No Tassadar, no problem. Sake's got a few tricks up his sleeves there.
And no surprise, you know, to focus on the AoE crowd control anytime going into the Ariel. I mean, she's a big problem because there aren't necessarily too many heroes that provide that AoE CC that we consider meta, right? But Gul'dan is one of the few that kind of fall into that caliber. So it's nice to see the adjustment from MVP, and it's even better to see it kind of pay off because suddenly you're like, okay, so everything I knew before this tournament might not be that crazy. You know, one poor game, they get upset. They're now not only adjusting their meta, they're still being dominant with it. And if now it's like, okay, if they had done this versus Tempest, would they have been able to win? It answers questions, but also probably raises equally as many.
Sake's performance in that game on that Gul'dan was absolutely amazing. It shows why he is in Phase 2, the highest both KD and KDA ratio in all of the league, over even heroes or players like Quacknix and Schwimpy, just barely. But he also on the other side, and a big part of that is because he rarely dies. He's tied with Schwimpy and Quacknix as the lowest deaths in all of the league. And even though we do see Sake, it feels like taking more of a backseat role, when he gets these heroes like Gul'dan, it's so fantastic to see him be able to shine.
You know, Breeze is sitting at home saying 118. That was his KDA at Western Clash, and he's like, look, can you do that at a Clash? Because that's almost impossible to replicate.
It's pretty good, Dread.
I mean, yeah, it is pretty good, but I feel like at this point, MVP Black is no longer worried about stat padding. They're more concerned about their ability to just actually succeed in this tournament at the expectation that they set for themselves before they walked in. And Soul Torture is here, though. One thing I do want to bring up that we haven't touched up on much, being able to go out there and hear the crowd and the Taiwanese fans. I mean, there is definitely got to be some momentum going in the favor. Whenever they get a pick, I mean, everybody is just blowing up out there. And so, I mean, if this next game, possibly we see Soul Torture step it up in the early game, that could be something that maybe staggers the mentality once more of MVP Black and they crumble.
It takes a village to raise the Soul Torturers. They are now